The NTSB has been on scene here in Orland, California, investigating the April 10, 2014 collision between a FedEx truck tractor with two semi-trailers and a passenger vehicle and motor coach. I'm going to be covering three areas today. I have some new information to provide. Two, I'm going to tell you about the new activities that are planned that are coming up today and in the days ahead, and also provide an overview of the NTSB investigation process. So let me begin with 5 new pieces of information. Previously, I told you a little bit of information about the Motorcoach driver's history. Today, I can tell you a little bit about the FedEx truck tractor driver. This driver is Sacramento-based, and previously, on the day of the accident, had taken a load of freight to Weeds, California, which is 49 miles south of the Oregon border. After that delivery, he picked up 2 new semi-trailers and was on his way back to Sacramento when the accident occurred. The first trailer was partially loaded. The second trailer was empty. We're in the process of collecting the manifests to determine the specifics of that partial load, especially if there was any hazardous material there. Our fire group has examined the accident scene and vehicles. There is no evidence of pre-impact fire located at the accident scene, on the median, or on the highway. Our survival factors group. Previously, we told you that the motor coach was equipped with a door as well as window exits. The motor coach is equipped with a door, but it is for handicap access, so it is locked and can only be opened by the driver. So it is not available to be used as an emergency exit. It is located midway on the passenger side. We also have learned that all the windows are available as exits, except for one, which is located in the back near the lavatory. Our fire group and survival factors are in the process of obtaining a video that is being provided by the driver of the Altima. That driver took a video on their cell phone. Clearly, they were there at the very beginning of this crash sequence, and that will be very important for us. We're also going to be able to obtain from the California Highway Patrol video from a dash cam. So these are cameras located on the dash of a California Highway Patrol officer who was one of the first responders on scene. This is critical information for us to understand how the fire progressed and also how passengers exited. Highway has obtained information from the California Department of Transportation. The initial documents have shown that this section of I-5 was constructed in 1964. The average daily traffic here, 23,400 vehicles per day, and 21% of those are reported as commercial motor vehicles. In the past 5 years, there have been 109 accidents in a 10-mile radius of this accident site. So that's 5 miles around. Of those 109 accidents, 1 involved a fatality, and there have been no previous crossover median accidents. So those are the 5 pieces of new information. Number 2, let me talk about the next activities. These are things happening today, over the next days and weeks. Our Motorcoach group is meeting with Silverado Stages. They are the owners and operators of the Motorcoach. Those meetings are being held in Los Angeles. Our human performance and survival factors groups are continuing their interviews with the student passengers. Those are mostly taking place in the Los Angeles area, as well as follow-up with witnesses, which are continuing to come forward. Some of those interviews will be handled as joint interviews with the California Highway Patrol. Our vehicles group is continuing to look at the post-crash inspection of the vehicles. Our reconstruction group is scanning the accident vehicles and reviewing the California Highway Patrol scans. A usual practice for us is we've already requested from FedEx an exemplar truck tractor and 2 semi-trailers. So we're getting an intact vehicle basically for our folks to examine from a variety of different aspects. Our highway group is reviewing the Caltrans documents. For example, while I mentioned that this part of I-5 was constructed in 1964, we're clearly interested to know if there are any upgrades. And as I have previously mentioned, If you hit over 50 feet for a median, then it's an option whether they need to have barriers or not. So we'll be looking at the documentation about their decision process to decide whether to put barriers or not into this section of the highway. Our Transportation Disaster Assistance Group, they will be confirming vehicle occupant information and continuing their interface with the coroner's office. The Ultima had an airbag that deployed, and there's a module that's available for us to download where we'll be able to get information from the Ultima. We currently expect to remain on scene for 5 to 10 days. Part of what's important about that is we will not only be on scene here in Orland, California and surrounding areas, but a lot of the investigation has moved to the Los Angeles area, especially for interviews and collecting documentation. So let me talk just briefly, giving you an overview of the NTSB investigation process. I have really tried to emphasize that we're in the preliminary stages of gathering factual information. Besides this period of obtaining that factual information, if needed, we can hold a hearing in Washington, D.C. Once all the factual information is gathered, there will actually be our groups getting together and confirming that factual information. After that, our Office of Highway Safety will analyze that factual information and then create a draft report. That report will include not just the factual information, but their analysis, their findings, a proposed probable cause, as well as safety recommendations that they're proposing. That draft report then comes before the full board, which makes the final determination on the findings, probable cause, and safety recommendations that will be issued out of this accident. The board meeting, and if there's a hearing, are all done in public domain. They are actually webcast live so that you can observe them and held in Washington, D.C. Along with that information, a public docket is open. So all the information that is public domain is actually available on our website, which I'll talk about in just a moment. I also want to emphasize again, it can take months for us to generate that final report. If at any time during our investigation we identify any issue that needs to be addressed immediately, then we will issue urgent safety recommendations. We don't have to wait to the end of our process to issue something that needs to be addressed immediately. This is going to be our last press briefing on scene. And there will be a preliminary report that will come out in about 30 days. That preliminary report will primarily be a summary of the factual information that's been obtained that you've been hearing now up until the 30 days when it's released. Ongoing information is going to be available from our website. That is ntsb.gov. There is already a dedicated page on that website to this investigation. So it lists press releases, videos from these press briefings, any public domain information that we can make available, you can get through the website. You should also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. So if there's new information that's being released, we will actually tweet that out so that you will know there's new additions to the docket, or if there, for example, is a hearing or when a board meeting is finally being scheduled. Keith Holloway, who I've introduced previously, will remain the public affairs officer. So he is your contact in an ongoing manner throughout this investigation until it's actually finished. The last thing I wanted to emphasize is while this is so preliminary regarding the factual information, what is very clear is that there are some issues that have already emerged related to our most wanted list. Our most wanted list, that's the NTSB's top 10. The top 10 issues in transportation safety that we believe can save lives and prevent injuries. 2 of the issues on that list are clearly relevant in this accident. One is occupant protection, specifically related to seatbelts, their use and effectiveness, and the crashworthiness of motor coaches. The second issue is fire safety, where we are focused on detection and suppression, but also the materials that are used in the construction of vehicles. So I will take some questions. Please give us your name and affiliation.
Yeah. Chris Weicker from CBS News. Have you looked at the FedEx driver's cell phone record to determine if it was in use in any way, texting or voice call immediately before or during the crash?
So the question is whether we've looked at the cell phone records of the FedEx driver and how distraction in particular might have been related to this crash. We are in the process of collecting all that information. And one of the things that I've tried to emphasize is we always look at the human, the machine, and the environment. Part of the human piece we're going to look at is not just things like training, but we're going to go over that driver's last 72 hours at least. And we're going to be looking at when they were at work, when rest took place, the cell phone use. Why is that important? Because in this case, we don't have somebody to interview. And so what we have to do is rely on other forms of information to tell what's going on. And so we know, for example, if somebody's off a certain time, but their cell phone is in use for a lot of that time, they may not have had an opportunity to sleep, for example. Or in this case, we're going to look at their use during their actual work period. So we're in the process of collecting that and looking at fatigue, distraction, and other human performance issues are top on our list.
May I
Follow up? Sure.
You mentioned the bus coach and seat belts. Whose responsibility is it, or does the bus company have a responsibility to say to the passengers, you must put your seat belts on, or that they are an option? How does that work?
So the question is, how does it work about informing the passengers, not just availability of the seat belts, but also their use? And that's one of the things we're going to be looking at. There is clearly an issue about the requirement for seat belts on buses, not just tour motor coaches, but school buses. There's a great debate about that related to crash worthiness. And what's highlighted by your question is it's not just making them available, but it's their use. And anybody who's ever been on an airplane knows that one of the first things that happens is your attention, please, to go over all the safety features. And so clearly we're going to be looking at the requirements, not just about the seatbelt, but the procedures to make sure that they're used. Yes, sir.
Kevin Wing, ABC News. You were speaking a minute ago about the windows of the bus and that they could open. So I just want to be sure I understand. When you say that they can open all the way that people can climb out of the windows? Because as we know, a lot of the students were kicking out the windows to escape the bus. Can you elaborate, please?
Yeah, so the question is about the use of the windows as an emergency exit. And we know at this point that all the windows were exits. And that's important just because sometimes in motor coaches it might be every other window, for example. So we know all of the windows were available. We have to see what the actual procedures were to get out and how they were labeled. So that's part of what we'll be looking at. This is another good example of why we need exemplars, examples that actually exist now. So this is a 2014 Serta motor coach, so we want to know what's there now, the procedures that are used, so we can understand that. And part of it is to know what the procedure is to actually get the window open, because one of the concerns, of course, is did that work or not? And if that was jammed, etc., could that be why we were seeing people actually kicking windows out, etc., which again would be why the video is then important to determine how many of those passengers exiting did we see using that procedure to get out.
May I just ask a follow-up?
Certainly.
Would it be standard procedure for the bus operator to educate the passengers as they're getting on the bus, as they're on the bus before they take their trip? You know, in the event of an emergency, this is what you do with the windows, et cetera, et cetera.
So the question is whether there is responsibility from the owner-operator to provide information about the safety features, including seatbelts that are available on the bus. At this time, there's no requirement just to have the seatbelts on there. So that's part of why the question was raised, and that was important for us to know that not just seatbelts, but they have the 3-point. So because there's no requirement for the seatbelts, there's not really guidance on how information regarding their use is there as well. So what you are raising are critical questions for us to look at, not just about the seatbelt's effectiveness, but their use. And so we'll be looking at that, and what you've just identified are the kind of things that we could focus on in future recommendations that could come out of an accident like this. Any other questions? Yes.
Is there any information you can share with, Gigi Graciette, Fox 11 News, Los Angeles. Is there any information you can share with us about the drivers? Are they veteran drivers, their ages, some information about them?
So there's any information about the drivers. We're still in the process of collecting that information. All of the aspects of the driver's training, age, medical condition, rest work history, all of that will be obtaining. One of the things obviously we should be acknowledging is we're in a weekend, and it's starting of holiday weekends. And so there's a lot of places we've been knocking on doors and they're closed because of the weekend. So all of those on our list to understand the drivers of both vehicles. And that's why really the preliminary information I've been able to give you about schedule was just stuff that we got now from people who were in the know. But we're going to be after all of that information.
Lieutenant Nurful with the Associated Press. Regarding fire safety, a lot of research and NTSB guidance on fire safety for motor coaches have focused on fires that start with a wheel well or electrical fires. How do post-collision fires fit into the board's call for fire safety?
So the question is, the NTSB has focused on fire safety. One part of that has been our detection and suppression focused. How does something like this fit into post-crash?
Right.
I think there are two elements of that, design and materials. So the design part, of course, has to do with propagation, as well as the materials, which have to do with their combustibility and their ability to progress the fire. So those are post-impact kinds of issues that we could address. Clearly, as you're pointing out in your question, detection and suppression are kind of trying to identify early. That's the one thing we know. You got to identify it early, so there's time to actually react. And this is across all modes. But what you're getting to with the post-impact is really important. It's the design as well as the materials that are used. As an example, one of the things we will evaluate is the kind of materials that are used in motor coaches compared to the materials that are used in other modes of transportation, like in commercial aircraft or rail cars.
Do you have any more information about the kind of materials that are on this bus, the sort of 2014?
So the follow-up question is, do we have any information of the materials that are actually on this 2014 CERTA? I can absolutely guarantee that's one of the pieces of the information that we're going to be going after. Here, and then we'll come here, please.
For clarification, are investigators already working in Los Angeles? And what will happen, you said you were going to be here 5 to 10 more days, what will happen to the coach and the truck?
So the first part of that question is, are investigators in Los Angeles already, and then what happens to the vehicles? We actually have investigators already in Los Angeles, and others will be transiting there over the next day or two as well. So we'll have a pretty large group eventually in Los Angeles. And the vehicles, when they're done?
They're the property of the
operators.
police, and then they'll be turned over to the insurance companies.
Got it. So essentially, yes. So right now, they're property of the police, and then eventually turned over to insurance companies. Yes, sir. There was a question.
Chris Stevens, KNTK Radio, wondering if, airplanes have a black box type of recording device and everything. Was there any type of black box type of device that was on the FedEx truck and the charter bus?
So the question is, like aviation, where there are black boxes, which are actually orange, which is always information for folks, is there anything like that on the motor coach or the truck? So we do know that these were both equipped with electronic control modules. The one on the truck was destroyed in the post-impact fire. However, we can look at aspects of steering and other pieces that did survive to possibly get a sense of the speed range and the revolutions of the wheels to maybe even know the direction they were in. The electronic control module, or ECM, is intact from the motor coach. So we've actually seen that and are in the process of working out getting that information downloaded. So we have to figure out whether California Highway Patrol will do that, whether we will do that, but it looks right now that that information is available. We do have to check because there's a lot of capability. This is a 2014 bus. There's a lot of capability there, but when you purchase the bus, it's the owner-operator who determines what's actually recorded. So while there's a lot of capability, we don't know yet what is actually on there.
Is that box here, or is it in Washington, D.C.? There was a report that that box had been moved to Washington, D.C.
So the question is where that ECM from the motor coach is. It's still here. We saw it yesterday and has not been removed. And that question is important because we're still determining who's going to download it. And so part of that is just who's got the equipment and right information. If needed, and this is just important, I think, to let people know, but our research and engineering in Washington, D.C. at the NTSB is frankly remarkable. And so a lot of times we can see things that look like there's nothing there, but it gets back to the lab, and they've got great techniques to try and salvage stuff. So it's not just the download, it's what's actually there that we can analyze and use for information. Yes, sir.
Mark, sounds like you, since yesterday's news conference, that you have new video now. Have all of you reviewed the video, and if so, can you elaborate what's on the video?
So the questions about the new video, we're actually, and whether it's been reviewed, we're still in the process of getting that. And let me just elaborate, because that's a really important question. When we get the video, there's actually a group that evaluates that. So it's not just one person, but if you think about it, our fire, survival factors, the vehicle, there are multiple people that are going to want a chance to review that. So they'll do that usually as a group to understand how it fits into the investigation overall.
So there's no crash scene evidence?
Let me just take this one in the back. Yes, sir.
Yeah, just so I'm clear, you said there's no evidence of a fire before the crash on that FedEx truck?
So the question is about the fire prior to the crash. And our fire expert reviewed the median and highway and found no physical evidence of fire before the impact. And that was on the median and highway. So there's no physical evidence of fire prior to the crash. Yes, let me go to the back there, and then I'll come here.
From KRCR News Channel 7. Much of this stretch of highway from the Oregon border all the way down to Sacramento does not have a median divider. Can you explain the process of what will go into that and whether it's even realistic for this area?
So the question has to do with the decision making in placing barriers and medians along highways. And previously, we've talked a little bit about the decision-making process in that it starts even just with the width of the median. So anything over 50 feet, it's an option to have something. And again, there are different kinds of medians that you can put in there. And so part of what we'll be looking at is the decision process that basically was gone through by the California Department of Transportation to clearly make the decision not to put a barrier here. And so we'll be looking at that. There's a process that involves the amount of vehicle traffic, some of the information I gave you about the number of accidents, for example. So I think we were just pretty important information there that out of 109 accidents, none have been crossover median. And I'm sure that those are the kinds of factors that will go into the decision making, whether it's there or not. However, what you're highlighting with this question is the highway features and designs remain a critical part of our evaluation, because we can look at this, by the way, not just here, but what does this mean for median barriers across the country?
We're going to take 2 more questions.
Great, and I'll go here and then back there. Go ahead.
Are you prepared to rule out fire on the truck prior to the crash yet? Or what else can you do to confirm whether or not that truck was on fire already?
So the question is, are we ready to rule out that there was no pre-impact fire in the truck? And I appreciate that question, because this gives me a chance to just say this is all preliminary factual information. Nothing is ruled out yet. And that's why we're giving you what we know, but at this point we're still factual. This is why the process that I just explained is gather the factual, then analyze. And this is what, no probable cause, no speculation, no analysis now, because we're just getting the factual. So I can confirm the factual part. We didn't find physical evidence. What that means in the overall investigation, we're not ruling anything out. Last question? Are you giving that to him? Okay, last question.
I have a question about witnesses.
Go ahead, you got the last one.
I wanted to ask you if NTSB has interviewed the 31-year-old Orland man who lives on the west side of I-5, and he had said that while he was outside mowing his lawn, he happened to look up, saw the FedEx truck just as it was about to cross over the freeway. He said there was no, from what he could see, there was no smoke, no flames, no fire. He said that the driver didn't look to be in any type of medical distress, but in fact seemed to look like he was trying to the driver was trying to overcorrect the steering. Just curious if you've interviewed that person yet.
So the question is whether the NTSB has interviewed a specific witness who's kind of been identified as the individual mowing his lawn on a side. That interview is actually taking place today with the Highway Patrol. And so previously I've been giving you our email address, witness@ntsb.gov, and I just really want to thank you, because you've been getting that out and we've been getting information from people. And so that's part of our continued on-scene, is witnesses that are coming forward or others. We will be both validating that information and pursuing any new information. That particular individual is actually on the schedule for an NTSB and CHB to interview that person today. So thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you very much.